you're going to get done for attempted murder. You're going to be looking at proper time in a big man prison. I shit myself.
Do you forgive your dad for what he's done to you?
I'm definitely going to tell you more in this interview. I don't even know if I told my fucking therapist this. It's torture. It's torture.
I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Gold Seal. I use their products every single day, and now I finally get to work with them. I use their products for anti-inflammatory, reduced anxiety, better sleep, and mental clarity. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description, along with a 10% discount code for you to take advantage of. Go and have a look at their website, see if there's anything in there for you. I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and good health. Richard.
Sir.
Thank you for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute honour to have you on. You're the most watched person on my television.
We have to talk about that, mate.
We will. we will.
I've got questions about that.
Well, that's good, because I want you to ask me a few questions, because before we go ahead, we know that within this space, this YouTube space, narcissism is a big topic. It's a big subject matter. Everybody thinks they're a walking authority on the subject. People think that if you like your own reflection, you're a narcissist, but it runs a hell of a lot deeper than that. My dad has got NPD, which is, for those that don't know, a narcissistic personality disorder. When I was investigating the subject further, I was led to you every single time.
By the Almighty.
Yeah. There you were. Like Jesus.
This is the truth, the light and the way.
So there'll be a lot of people watching this that already know you, and there'll be people that won't.
Yeah.
So people know that you're completely and utterly qualified to discuss narcissism, and obviously your own life, and obviously your own life story, because we're going to cover that.
Yeah.
Just rattle off your credentials.
Well, I mean, I've got a degree in psychology. From Aston University, and it was a behavioural psychology degree, which is basically popping rats in T-shaped mazes. But then in 2012, I'd been running a self-defense channel since the inception of YouTube, and it probably was a little bit too violent. They warned me a couple of times, and I was younger. I was like, how the fuck am I supposed to teach people how to do violence without violence? And I didn't stop, and they just took it off me. But I had a client list of people, because I became like an instructor's instructor, because I was blending psychology with martial arts. There was already good lads who were teaching people, how to do military style combatives or street fighting. Like, they were teaching the headbutt and the elbow. And there's so many, yourself, there's only so many ways to do it. There's not that many ways you can do it. But what I was doing was I was blending the psychology of it. So I was preparing people for the adrenaline, the emotion, the horror, and how to tap into some aggression in order to get the job done. So I had credibility as an applied psychologist in a crowd of people who were mainly combatives instructors. So on my client list, I had bodyguards, police, soldiers, special forces guys, and they'd been asking me for about 3 years, I need your advice on something. I'll be like, is it some sort of aggression drill, or is it like how to beat somebody up in some environment or whatever? And they'd be like, no, it's my wife. I can't say no to her. And I'm like, fuck off, mate. Come on. You've been over there. You've done the do. You're hard as fuck. You can't say no to your wife. I can't say no to my wife. And if somebody cuts in front of me at the queue at the supermarket, I freeze. You're messing. You faced way more danger than I have. What are we talking about? And so I started to realise there was a problem that needed fixing. And then when the channel died, I was like, I was living in Malaysia. I was like, well, maybe I should start focusing on the problem that these guys have. So what I started out with, I didn't start out with narcissism. I just called it people pleaser syndrome. I was like, obviously, a lot of soldiers, a lot of police, whatever people may think of police and soldiers and whatever, aside from the politics, they're very driven by certain core values like self-sacrifice and honour and duty and being part of a hierarchical system that demands a lot of self-discipline from them. Well, oddly enough, that makes them the perfect fucking targets for emotional predators, But I didn't know that. So I was just like, oh, let's talk about people pleaser syndrome. Let's talk about building your boundaries and asserting yourself, because they could assert themselves in a firefight, but then they'd get home and they just couldn't do it. So I started to focus on that. And the more I was releasing material about that and doing coaching sessions via Skype while I was living in Malaysia about that, then people started to say to me, can you talk about narcissism? Now, my background in psychology was neurolinguistic programming and behavioral psychology, and we didn't really buy into personality disorders. So I say this to people, they think university degrees in psychology are psychotherapy. But it's not. You don't cover narcissism. You don't cover psychopathy. You can do a full 3 years and never cover it. We had one module on abnormal psychology where it was a 10-week long module, and in the 10th session for 10 minutes, they covered narcissism and psychopathy. That was it. So I had to learn. So I'm not credentialed by a university, really. I mean, I have a degree in psychology. I can read a paper. I know how to read research. I know how to read a paper roughly. Don't ask me on methodology and statistics because I don't like maths. But I can read an abstract and I can read a conclusion of a paper. So I started to study it. And I was like, well, there's obviously something here. And, you know, it's something that my clients are interested in. So fine, I'll just go, you know, I'll go where the market's taking me. And then as I was teaching it, I was like, oh shit, this is about my experiences. This is about my life. And so that slowly opened up in front of me. And then, so that was in 2012. So it's been 12 years now. But I'm self-taught as far as narcissism and psychopathy goes. It's self-taught.
I've certainly been victim of grandiose narcissism from my own father. I don't like to use the word victim, but I've also got experience being on the receiving end of covert narcissism. So I know just how consuming, damaging.
Well, your father was sexually abusive, wasn't he?
He was everything abusive.
He was always
There
abusive.
was sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse.
And he was convicted for it.
Convicted, he's...
My father was as well. A convicted paedophile as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So my dad was banged up for that as well, yeah.
Well, I'll be damned.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go straight into your life, and we're obviously going to cover, because people will be tuning in because the thumbnail is going to have narcissism in there.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people that they're searching for answers. They're in situations and relationships that they just can't work their way out of the maze that they're in.
Yeah.
And so we'll help them people along the way, because I will pep you with questions on specifically covert narcissism how it's very hard to spot, and just how damaging it is, and how long it can go on for, and, you know, the consequence of being on the receiving end.
Yeah.
PTSD.
Yeah.
Other horrible, nasty stuff that will linger potentially for life. But yeah, you've just said something that's really, well, it shocked me. Didn't have any idea. I knew that you'd lived a life because you
I've lived several lives.
Yeah, I knew that you must have a powerful story, because what you've retained in your brain and your knowledge and your wisdom, and how you've got a very good way of navigating through sort of treacherous grounds.
Yeah.
I knew that this guy must have a hell of a story, and you've confirmed that within the first 10 minutes of our conversation. So let's go. Can we go back to your childhood and you just paint the picture of where you grew up and what it was like, both mum and dad?
Sure. So I think the first thing to say is, like, I'm more than happy to talk about narcissism and narcissistic abuse, and people who are watching this and they've clicked in for that. It is very, very important. It's probably the tip of a larger iceberg, though, and probably the real. So people think my life is about narcissism and narcissistic abuse, the people who know me only through YouTube. The story is really about sexual abuse, and it's about childhood abuse and childhood trauma. So the big picture is childhood trauma. Narcissistic personality disorder is a manifestation of childhood trauma. Being a codependent is a manifestation of childhood trauma. I know people who are against therapy are like, oh, here we go. If it's psychotherapy, we have to talk about our childhood. But that is the formation of all the structure of our personality. It really is in childhood. And we know now, as we learn more and more about neurobiology, and I think that's going to dominate, endocrinology and neurobiology is going to dominate the field of psychology as medicine improves in the next 20 to 30 years, barring a nuclear war. And that's going to be the topic. And we know when you're a kid, your brain is literally softer. It's more malleable. It's called neuroplasticity. And when you look at little kids, and they're so vulnerable and they're so open, their brain, their central nervous system is vulnerable and open, and they're taking messages that they then carry forward for the rest of our lives. You said before the interview started, in many ways, we are all still children. Yes, the children we were are still here. They're still right here. The way we process reality, the way we categorize our experiences, it's all rooted in childhood. Now, if your parents were okay, we call them in the psychotherapeutic space, good enough parents, they weren't perfect, but they were good enough and they met your needs. They showed you how to have boundaries and a degree of impulse control. Life is still going to be tough because life is hard. However, if your parents, due to some pre-existing issue in their childhood, and then there's intergenerational trauma that goes back to their parents and their parents' parents and so on and so forth, which can be cultural, where I'm from the Northwest, I'm from the Wirral, but the Liverpool and Wirral is full of Irish immigrants who came over because they were doing manual labour because they were very, very poor. And that's what they needed. And it brings with it trouble. They were all Catholics. It brings with it a degree of stress and a degree of trouble. And it's in the water, it's in the ideology, it's in the DNA. A Scouser sometimes whinge at me, they're like, why does the rest of the country think we're all a bunch of crims? Like, because we're all a bunch of fucking criminals, maybe. The stereotype exists for a reason, perhaps. But we can trace that historically, as we trace in psychoanalysis. We trace the individual historically. We can trace the group historically. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just, it is what it is. These were people who were desperate and endured a lot of stress and strain. And then they had their religious beliefs bearing down on them as well. And they acted out in different ways. And I think the narcissism is an okay lens to look at the world through, but it's not the best categorical lens. I think childhood trauma is the best categorical lens to look at the world through. Whatever you're looking at, you're looking at something politically, you're looking at something historically or culturally. It's childhood trauma that informs everything. We are more neuroplastic when we are children. We arrive on the earth. We are here to learn. Your body, your brain is learning. It's soaking up information. If your parents were not good enough parents, if due to something that they're carrying or some unresolved trauma that they're carrying, they are envious of you, or they begin to hate you, or they begin to see you as an extension of themselves or a tool or a bucket to throw their negative emotion into, then life becomes significantly more different. And then we start to, as children, because we can't bear the load of that trauma, we warp, we become broken. That's trauma. It's not stress, it's trauma. The difference between stress and trauma is breakage of the structure. The structure breaks. And people can heal, they can recover. There is a positive side to all this. There is hope. But it's important to understand that, I think. That's the big picture story, is childhood trauma.
So when I used to watch your content, because it was the covert narcissism that I was particularly interested in, because I found it fascinating, but it was just a huge revelation. All these thoughts and feelings that I had and little things that I couldn't quite put my finger on, you verbalized them and explained them perfectly. And I always look beyond the surface and I always think, okay, well, how does this man know all of that? Because there's no book in the world that can actually teach you that, because feelings are different and we're sensory. So I thought that it's been tough relationships with women, maybe a divorce that had triggered you to go down the rabbit hole of psychopathy and narcissism, etc. And I didn't even for 1 second consider that your trauma started as a child. So what was your childhood trauma?
Where did you start? So I suppose if you look at like the first 20 years of my life, we would flip because my father was cycling through various phases of his own mental issues. So at times we were very, very poor, and then we would have money, and then we'd be poor again, then we'd have money, and then we'd be poor again. We moved a lot. I think I did 15 different schools. I was in 15 different schools and sometimes in different countries. So I was constantly making friends and then being pulled out, making friends and being pulled out. My father was was a philanderer, so he was cheating on my mother a lot. That created a lot of stress for her. She had her own issues from her own childhood. She didn't cope with that stress very well. So the experience of being alive growing up wasn't particularly pleasant. You know, I was in an environment where there was a lot of resentment, a lot of hatred, a lot of violence. And sometimes that was between my parents, but it would spill over into me or into my sister. And so I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel particularly wanted. It's very hard for me to get into a relationship and feel welcome and to feel wanted. I kind of have an assumption that the person must be resentful of my presence because that's what I experienced in childhood. That's what my central nervous system wired to. There was some physical violence. There was a lot of psychological violence. I was in a lot of fear. I developed alopecia nervosa when I was younger. So if my parents screamed at me, like clumps of my hair would just fall out. So I'd have like clumps out the back of my head. And I felt very vulnerable. I felt very impotent a lot of the time. Sometimes I witnessed other children being abused in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to help them.
Who was that by?
There was different circumstances. So the sexual abuse wasn't just inside of my family unit. It was with a family unit that we were, that my family spent time with. And then it was institutional. So there was teachers. So that experience of watching somebody being abused in front of me and not being able to stop it, I think that happened 3 or 4 times. And when I'm talking about abuse, 2 of the times it was sexual and 2 of the times it was like violence. It was like violence. It was like watching another child being throttled and struck in the head and screamed at, which is, even though it wasn't happening to me, in many ways that was more traumatic. Or what I really remember is that was more traumatic. I think when it's happening to you, you dissociate. So there's a lot of terror. There was a lot of fear. The sexual abuse crept in. It was groomed in. So it was a hypersexualized environment that I grew up in.
And was it from your mum, your dad, or both?
With mum, it was physical violence. With my father, it was total indifference, even to the fact that my mum was physically violent. The only time he showed an interest was of an inappropriate nature, of a sexual nature.
From what age?
The first memory I have, so I'm in therapy for this. I go to therapy once a week for this. The first distinct memory I have is a pattern on a duvet cover.
Are you okay talking about all this?
Yeah, it's fine.
Because I didn't know it was going to go down this.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And if it's not, I'll see my therapist again next week. It'll be all right. I want to talk about it because I know that like a lot of people carry this, men and women, they carry it. And then they'll go to therapy and be like, oh, I have insomnia, or oh, I have codependency issues. And it's like, well, sure, but what happened to you? Like the insomnia is like over there. What's really happening to you is here. And it happens a lot. And people don't talk about it because they're ashamed of it. So I remember this vile 70s style pattern on a duvet. I must have been 6.
Around 1984?
Yes, around 1984, precisely, 1984, ironically enough. And it was presented to me, as I say, it was kind of like a grooming. So I had a degree of agency in what was happening. It was as though I wanted to do it. That was the situation that was being manipulated. And the first experience I had of that was with a child who was staying the night at our house. And my father was sleeping with that child's mother, cheating on my mother with her, and then inducing me and this child to do things while he watched. That was his bag. That was his thing.
Were you and the other child the same age?
Yeah, we would have both been 5 or 6, yeah.
Same sex?
Yes, same sex. Which, of course, it was a hypersexualized environment with very, very poor boundaries. We moved to Portugal in 1985. And there were other families who were kind of on the same page.
I was going to say, so the woman that your dad was having the affair with, she was complicit in that abuse that took place.
I don't know exactly who was complicit in what because my memory is very scrambled. It's dissociative. She may not have known. She may not have known about that. But when her son returned home, I don't know what happened with him. I don't know whether he grew up straight or not because I've got mates who had similar experiences in childhood that were like that, and they struggled with their sexuality. They don't know whether they're straight or gay. They don't know what they really like and what they really want.
Did your dad watch or did he record as well?
Watched.
Okay.
Watched. But he always had cameras. He did always have cameras. So I only remember him watching, but he had recording equipment. So it's possible. The thing with Portugal has come up a couple of times when I'm in therapy because obviously you remember the Madeleine McCann case. Some people said there are paedophiles operating in the southern coast of Portugal. And they said there's never been any evidence of that. And there's never been any evidence of a girl being killed. Well, there was paedophilic activity going on in the south of Portugal. It was the Madeleine McCann case is, I don't know, 20 years after I was there, but there was. And there was a girl killed. My sister's best friend was killed at age 9. She was raped and strangled to death. So when everybody was saying this has never happened in the Algarve before, it's just not true. In 1989, she was kidnapped, she was raped, she was strangled to death, and her body was left on the beach. I don't know what happened with the Madeleine McCann case. I'm only reflecting on what people said about it that just wasn't true. And when I'm talking about paedophilia, I don't know what people who haven't experienced it, they might think that that's always going to mean some overt sort of forced sexual assault. There's certain words we can't use on YouTube. Scenario, which was happening, but then there was also just not proper boundaries between children and adults. And there was a lot of basically saying to children who were too young or inferring that children had sexual desires and inferring that this is what children wanted. And you might think, well, it sounds a bit creepy, but it doesn't sound that bad. But that led to, it created an environment of permissiveness in which stronger things happened. So yes, there was, that was, and then I was sent to boarding school at age 13 from Portugal and got nonce again at boarding school. Fucking nonces everywhere, mate.
Well, they can smell the vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And you're now conditioned by the time you're 13.
Yeah.
So when you was in Portugal between 7 and 13, did the abuse continue there also?
Yes.
From your dad?
Yes, and from a woman who was looking after us and from another man who was looking after us as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, well, it's extremely heavy and so confusing because that now for you is the norm because you've not been alive long enough to know what's right and what's wrong. To you, that's just...
I ended up thinking that was normal. And then I think before the age of 11, I'd then induced another kid to do what I was induced to do. And so then I was basically carrying it forward because I just thought that was normal.
Did your dad play porn in front of you?
There were multiple households where porn was freely available, but it wasn't as overt as that until I was a little bit older. When I was like 14 or 15, he kept on saying to me, "You sure you're straight? You don't have to be straight, you know. You could be gay if you wanted to be gay." And I was like, "I like birds. Like, leave me alone." He was like, "No, I'm just saying you could be gay. You could be gay." So I don't know if in his narcissistic psychopathy, he hated me that much because I'm from his second family, his second set of kids. Maybe I took the attention of my mother away from him and onto me, and he wanted to take revenge on me, just, you know, do something corrupting to me in some way. Nothing against people who are homosexual, but I wasn't, and he tried to make me be something that I wasn't.
Do you think there's a possibility that his desires were to have sex with men and he was gay and he wanted you to be like him?
I think so.
Because that was, I believe, my dad's thing. My dad wanted me to be a mini him. He wanted me to sell drugs, enforce violence, be a piece of shit, essentially. And luckily, I had people that would steer me in the right direction. But that was his burning desire. He wanted me to be a mini him. That's the only reason I asked. Do you think that's a possibility that?
No, 100%. No, he like a typical narcissistic psychopath, he scooped out a lot of who I was and inserted himself into that space, literally and figuratively, unfortunately for your audience. Sorry about that. But yes, that is what he wanted. He wanted me to be a manifestation of him.
So your dad went the full distance with you?
Yes. And with the court case is done with the daughter from his first marriage when she was 13, multiple times, violently. And that's what got him banged up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you went to boarding school, was he in prison by this stage or not?
No, there was no court case brought until I was 30 years old.
Okay, so you were subjected again to more sexual abuse?
Yes, and again, it was kind of like a grooming sort of a situation from an older boy who, well, what happened was my parents sent me to a boarding school where most of the kids actually went home at the weekend. They only stayed Monday through Friday, and then they went home. So in the weekends, it was mainly foreigners or people who didn't, so the lad who was abusing me was Canadian. So he got hold of a lonely 13-year-old. I wasn't used to living in the UK. I certainly wasn't used to wearing a school uniform and being in a very religious school. So I was lonely. I would spend most of my weekends just in the library on my own, just reading books. And he was a good musician, and that's how he pulled me in. That's how he groomed me. I wasn't complicit, but I also wasn't violently resistant with him. Other lads stood up for me as far as violence went. I don't know why. I was capable of being violent by the time I was 13, but I just didn't have it in me to hit him because I thought he was pathetic and he just had a sickness. But I was in a dorm with a Japanese kid, Tomoyuki Kiriyama. And there was a couple of times when this older boy would come in at like 3:00 in the morning when I was asleep and try and do stuff to me. And Tomoyuki would jump off the bed and grab a ladder off the the bunk bed, twat him with it. And then another lad battered him with a hockey stick and smashed his room up for what he'd done to me. And I wasn't sorry because what he was doing was wrong. I just didn't have the strength to protect myself. And I kind of still felt sorry for him. So even though he was victimizing me, I felt sorry for him as a victim of his own.
Mm. And so how long was your stint at boarding school? From 13 up until?
Oh, that was 2 years. And then my parents returned from Portugal. And so I went and lived with them up in the Wirral.
When you're telling me what you went through as a young lad, a boy and a teenager, I'm thinking to myself, how on earth were you able to learn, retain information, focus on education when you've got all that going on?
I struggled. My GCSEs were shit. And it was weird because the school was pushing me towards Cambridge because I was a good linguist. And they were like, oh, you should go and do Spanish and Portuguese at Cambridge. And I had good teachers at the school. Some of them had been through Oxford and Cambridge and good universities. They're like, you could go to Cambridge, you could do it. But my GCSEs were shit. Couldn't concentrate on anything. And I was always in fantasy land. I was always reading like sci-fi fantasy books about magic, books about Buddhism. I loved martial arts. My whole life at that time was like ninjutsu and aikido. That's all I cared about. I just wanted to learn about another foreign place, somewhere far away. I wanted to learn about feudal Japan. Oddly enough, my half-sister, who was raised by my father, when she turned 18, she moved to Japan. She went all the way around to the other side of the planet to get away from him and to get away from the memories. She learned Japanese and she'd moved there. So my head was in the clouds. I wasn't in this reality.
You had a lot of problems going on, didn't you?
Inside my head, yeah. Which I tried to solve by taking acid, which I started. I think the first time I took it, I was 13 at boarding school.
This is very, very uncanny because that was also something that I indulged in heavily. And it was my dad that, well, he essentially fed me LSD at the age of 14 or 15 I was.
Evil. Evil.
That's the word. I've always tried to work out words to describe my father. And it was his sister that actually used that word evil. And it's like, yeah.
Evil is evil. I used to not say evil. We were trained, it's not a moral thing. This isn't a church. This is psychotherapy. Fuck that. It's evil. Evil is evil. You know evil. Every animal instinct in you goes, oh shit, the darkness is here. The demons are here. And you know it. And when things are good and a good spirit is there, you go, this is good. I know that this is good. It's primal. And yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I don't. I've always believed that. But on YouTube, I pretend I don't believe it because I have to be, sane and sensible. But I do believe that. As a human being, as a person having an experience on this planet, absolutely I believe that. There's good and there's evil in the world. And there's a battle between the two. For sure. Acid just makes that much more visceral because you start to see it. You start to feel it.
So you started using acid to self-soothe from the abuse?
Yeah, so my ideology that I'd imbibed was very much Eastern philosophy, but I realised I was taking Eastern philosophy filtered through Westerners. And apart from anything else, a lot of the shit is just fucking mistranslated. And then you go, oh, well, we'll talk to modern Easterners, which I have done on Eastern philosophy, and they don't get it either. They're not using the original manuscripts. They're not using the original definitions. They're using modern. So what we have, I won't go off on Eastern philosophy, but just very, very briefly. When people say Hinduism or Buddhism is a manifestation of Hinduism or the Vedas, we have a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Anybody who wants to get involved in it, you must go and look up the Sanskrit terms and look at what they mean etymologically because we're miles away from the original meaning now. So I'd imbibed this bad photocopy version of Eastern mysticism. I knew that there was Sartorian nirvana through enlightenment. And I was like, well, I don't want to meditate for 30 years. Let me take this little piece of paper under my tongue and get straight fucking there. And I probably did have kind of enlightening moments, but mostly it just terrified me and confused me.
It's good we can laugh about it.
Yeah, because I was acting like a crazy person. I was acting like a schizophrenic. I'd be like, right, I'm going to take a trip now. Write down on a piece of paper. I want to know the nature of God. I want to speak to God on this trip. And then I'd be writing pages and pages. I'd be like, I figured it out. And then the next day I'd read it. I'd be like, this is gibberish. This is absolute fucking mush that you could do nothing with. So I thought there'd be a way of escaping the realm of suffering through forcing an enlightenment with psychedelics, which I don't recommend. And people nowadays be like, what do you think about psychedelics for trauma healing? I'm like, if you want to try, go ahead. You're an adult, but I'm not recommending it.
I totally agree. So let's cover your life now from I suppose when you left boarding school up until 30 when your dad got convicted. So you learnt martial arts and you've worked the door. So you've got very good life experience at reading situations as well. So all these tools you've picked up along the way, if you can just freestyle it from sort of 17 to 30 and then we get into the nuts and bolts of your dad's conviction.
Okay. By the time I was 18, people in my school, I was getting mixed results academically, but they could see I had something going on. So they were saying, look, apply for Cambridge, because I'd lived in Portugal, so I could speak okay Portuguese. I'd lived a little bit in Spain. I could speak okay Spanish, do Portuguese and Spanish. And I said, no, if I'm intelligent enough, I want to do what the leaders of this country do. They go and they study psychology, philosophy and politics at Oxford. PPP. And my teachers were saying, you're clever, but you're not that fucking clever. Please don't. And I just wouldn't listen to them. So I said, no, fuck it. I'm going to Oxford. I'm going to do PPP. I'm going to get in. And I applied to Oxford. I had a mate. So I had two mates in the air above me. One was a very good linguist and he was black and gay. This is an important thing. The other chap was terminally ill and wheelchair bound. So they got into a college that I won't name in Oxford that was woke. And I went, well, I'll follow you. And the college wouldn't even interview me, which was unheard of. And then my school was, my headmaster was harumphing because he'd been to Oxford. He was like, I've never sent a boy to be interviewed and you refuse me. You have to interview him. And they went, no, we fucking don't. We don't want him. They just didn't want me. They just didn't want. It was a mistake. And then I realised, I was only 18. I was like, it's not about academic qualification. It's not about what you can bring to the university or what you can learn. It's also about politics with a small p. I wasn't the right fit. So I became a bit resentful. And I had offers to other universities that were good universities for psychology and philosophy. I was like, nah, fuck them. I'm not going now. Don't even want to go. So I just said, well, which university is going to give me, I don't give a fuck about academia now. Which university is going to give me a degree that means I'm going to make money? And that was at Aston University. So I was like, I'll go there then. And people are saying to me, this is not right for you. It's a behavioral psychology degree. You're going to have to pass through the business school, so you're going to have to do more study. I had to study management and accounting as well as doing a full psychology degree. But I was bitter and I was young and just hard-headed. I just wasn't listening. So I went and did that. Absolutely hated the degree. All fair play to Aston, though. 80% of fast-track graduate jobs that I applied when I left, they gave me the job. But I would just leave. Aldi gave me a job. So 1999, I had a job with Aldi where they gave me an Audi. I had 500 quid a week. And I think I lasted a month and I was like, fuck it, don't want to do it.
And what was it you were doing?
Area manager. But during my time at university, I decided, I want to go join MI5. So what I'll do is I'll do the officer's commission in the British Army. And then after that, I'll do either 3 years or 7 years. And then I'll try and get into the intelligence services. I was just incredibly naive. I just really didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I thought that MI5 recruited people from military intelligence. So I was really keen on the army. When I was 21, I went for the parachute regiment in Aldershot, which was a very formative and informative experience for me. I'd quit smoking the week before, so I was hacking along up, utterly failed all the physicals. I tell this story to my ex-military mates. They don't believe me. They said, I failed the physicals. The basic fitness test I did in 15 minutes. They wanted you to do it in like under 9. And the captain, who was of the regiment for the potential officer course, said to me, Sandhurst is going to sort you out. They'll whip you into shape inside of 9 months. You shouldn't have quit smoking. Look at our PTs. They had PTs smoking while we were on the trainasium, while we were doing the log runs and stuff. The PTs would be screaming at you and smoking. He said, you should have kept smoking. Okay, you didn't. But they gave us psychology tests. The parachute regiment was, of all the potential officer courses I went on, was the most thorough. And they were very thorough with your psychology. Obviously, it's a very high level athletic regiment, but they really wanted you to have the psychology. And they were doing stuff to me that was making other lads there were crying. You know, people who are like, they're runners for their county, they're extremely fit, but they couldn't handle the psychological pressure. And because of the way I was raised, I didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, give me some examples.
So they put you on something called the trainasium. And you look at it from the floor, and it's not that bad. It's like a piece of scaffolding with different bits and ropes and webbing and nets hanging off it. It's 3 stories high. If you fall, you're going to fall through scaffolding. You're definitely going to break a leg or pop a hip or something. And a lad had the week before. And then they'll do weird things. So there's actual psychological testing that the powers did. And then there was like a test of your ability to be disciplined in the face of fear. So they were like, can you respond with aggression and discipline in the face of fear? When we say go, are you going to fucking go or not? And they swore and shouted a lot. They're terribly rough, the powers. You going to fucking do it or not? Yes, yes. We all got assigned colours and numbers, and I was black 1. So my group was black, and I was number 1, and I was like, oh yeah, black sheep number 1. This is me. So they'll do things like maybe you're a story up, and you're going to run along a piece of plank that's not very wide, and then you're going to jump maybe 2 meters, maybe a meter across and a meter down onto another plank. If it was on the ground, you'd be like, whatever. But because it's high and you have to run, if you sort of namby-pamby it, you're going to fall and you're going to fucking hurt. They're like, run straight at the other fucking plank. Do you understand me? Yes, Sarge, I understand you. Okay, fucking go. And there were boys, I swear, like 3 or 4 lads just stood there and they went, they're fucking, the body wouldn't go. And they were fit. They were strong. They were army barmy. They were all about getting the cherry berry, but they would break down because they couldn't believe it, and they'd be RTU'd. They would just send them home. They'd be like, right, that's it. You're fucked. I didn't mind. I didn't give a fuck about myself. I was like, whatever. What are we doing? You want me to run off that? And I'd run and laugh. They stuck us on the top of the trainasium. They did various things. You got to do a rope swing. You got to jump here, there, and everywhere. It's to test you psychologically for your discipline and your obedience and your aggression in the face of fear. So the last one is parallel bars. So you're 3 stories up, then you climb up another little bit, and there's just 2 steel bars like you'd see in a kid's park. You can dip on it if you want to.
Yeah.
You climb up with your army boots and you wedge outward. So the heel is wedging you out. So you have to be aggressive or you will fall. And your body doesn't want to wedge out. What your body wants to do is climb the fuck down and stop. So you stand up there, and they made us all walk across, and you kind of squeak across the parallel bars. And then they'd stop you and they'd make you do different things. It was a windy day. And I remember the captain, this guy actually liked me in the end, but he was torturing me to fuck. He stopped me halfway through. He was like, "You all right out there, black one?" "Yes, Captain." "Are you having a good time?" "I love it, Captain." I want you to smile for me. Now, a couple of times when I'd been physically abused, I'd been told to smile during the process. Like, you have to smile whilst you're being physically abused. You have to smile. And I was like, you fuckers think this is a test? This is fuck all for me. This is nothing. So that side of it, they liked. They did things where they would get us in a room, and there would be like, I don't know, 10 officers and a couple of sergeants, and everybody would scream at you and drag you down and poke at you. And I was like, this is like Christmas. This is literally like Christmas Day in my family home. I think it's a family unit. Go ahead. I didn't give a fuck. But it was killing some of the lads because they had adult men that they respected screaming at them and bollocking them.
And you're already preconditioned for that.
Give a fuck. I was like, just don't make me run again.
Yeah.
Don't take me over the assault course. Fucking hell, the assault course I thought I was going to throw up. And then I got so knackered, I was like, I think I'm actually going to shit myself. You know, when you've been through like CrossFit or some hard training or boxing or BJJ, you're like, and you think you're going to spew. There's a point beyond that where your body's like, I will shit myself if you don't stop. So the physical stuff, I failed it, but the psychological stuff I did okay. And then they had us do things like, right, you're going to perform publicly in front of the regiment tonight, inside of the officers' mess. You're going to perform for the regiment. What are you going to do? And I just wrote poetry, taking the piss out of all the officers for all their weird habits. They fucking loved it.
Brilliant. Because
I had to manage narcissistic, psychopathic personalities. I knew where the line was. You push the line to be funny, but you don't cross the line. So this officer is, always going off for a sneaky cigarette. This officer's always using this particular phrase to bollock you with. I just gently took the piss out of them and wrote a bit of poetry. They fucking loved it. They were ecstatic. So all that to say, like, I failed physically. And like I say, I've said to my mate who's a Royal Marine Commando, he's like, there's no way they would have accepted you if you failed physically. I'm telling you, I failed physically. What they said was, if you have a total physical transformation in Sandhurst, which is 9 months of training, then you get to be, there's no guarantee. You're not ever offered a guarantee. But at the end of that, I would have been interviewed by General Sir Michael Jackson, which was fucking intimidating had I gone to Sandhurst. But I never did, because before my final RCB, I was out in Chester with 2 of my mates and their 2 girlfriends, and we were like, we're now going to go to Yates's, but we're all public school kids and posh, and we'll get filled in. Or we can go to the gay club where it's 2 for 1 on drinks, and they play house music, and we'll have a good time, and then we can go home. So we went to the gay club in Chester called Loves, which was on Love Street in Chester, and I got glassed. I got glassed before the RCB. Yeah, I got hit in the face with half a pint glass there for being gay, which I'm not. It was a fucking outrage.
So it was a homophobic attack.
It was a homophobic attack.
You were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The guy came over to me. He'd gone in there to beat up somebody who was gay, which means he probably was gay himself. And he came over to me on the dance floor and he said, "You dance like a faggot." And I said, yes, darling, I've had lots of practice. And he didn't think that was funny. He headbutted me and glassed me. And then the doorman chased him, got hold of him. And he did, I think he did 9 months. In court, he said, I didn't know I had the glass in my hand. I was trying to slap him. I forgot I held the glass. And the jury went, yes, that sounds legitimate. People forget they're holding a glass when they slap someone. So yeah, he got 9 months.
I mean, how did you take that emotionally?
It bothered me a lot. It bothered me a lot because I was like, wow, that guy left his house to go and do permanent facial injury to somebody because he doesn't like their sexuality. Now, I'd experienced some weird things, but I'd not experienced that. That shook me. That shook me quite a lot. He didn't break the glass and then stick it in my face. He broke the glass on my face. So the only scars I have now is like there was an impact cut round the eye, but it broke. And so there was little pieces of glass that went into the bag under my eye, into my nose, into my lip. And then I started to stall and I was like, my confidence had taken a little bit of a hit. And I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll take 6 months. I'll get into better physical shape because I'd quit smoking by then. And then I'll go back and then I'll do my RCB, which is the final test for Sandhurst. You're 9 months as officer training, and then you go to your regiment.
And at what age are you now?
21, 22.
Okay.
So I took a job working in an office in Liverpool, and on the desk for Sainsbury's, actually, in the back end of their customer services. And on the desk with me was 2 Scousers who were doing the door. One of them was an ex-pro bodybuilder, and the other one was a dealer. And we would talk about martial arts because you're bored, because you're not working, because we were just lazy fuckers. Oh, martial arts is shite, that doesn't fucking work. It's all shite. I was like, no, some of it's pretty good, you know. Want to show me something then? So we go into the canteen, and I'd show them stuff to be like, hey, that's all right, that. So I want to come down the gym on Saturday. So then Saturdays I was going down the gym and showing lads little bits and pieces that they could use for the door. Did that for a while, and then they were like, you should go on the door, you. I was like, no, I don't think that's a very good idea. And eventually I did. They gave me my first line of coke. They gave me my first shot of test. Then I was doing nightclub security 5 days a week in Liverpool.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I was useful. I got used. I decided to see it as a customer services role. If I needed to be physical, I could control and restrain people. I wasn't the guy who was like head kicking people for being drunk or knocking people out and breaking their jaws. I wasn't a big guy. But I knew how to speak to people, and so yeah, got quite a lot of work doing that. So there was a few years where I just was doing that, snorting coke and fighting with people and
taking steroids,
taking roids. Yeah, eventually, inevitably, of course, being in that world, I did get into quite a serious fight where I did do. Somebody had put a bottle through my head doorman's lip and opened his lip to the bone, and that, I don't know, something switched in me, and I did something to the people who'd done that I deeply regret, because they needed a hiding, but they didn't deserve what I did to them.
You know, we can't just skim past this now. You've said that. I'm going to have to ask you to compound.
Well, the family's still in Liverpool, and I don't know who watches what. I apologised at the time. They were chasing me for a while. I gave them money, apologised to the father, apologised to the mother, tried to apologise to the lads that I'd done it to, but they wouldn't give me access to them. I really, really, really lost my mind. When it happened, I wasn't working. I made a stupid choice to go and drink at a club that I'd quit working at the week before. And I was warned not to. I used to get tarot card readings, and the tarot card reader said, you should never go to that club again. And I said, why? And she said, beware the man in black who walks with a limp. And I was like, ooh, scary. Who the fuck's that? So I went, had a drink. One of my mates on the door, Ben, at one point, it was like 11 o'clock at night, he goes, come in the fire exit with me now, lad. And I went, fucking hell, it's going off. And he pulls me into the fire exit, hoops a big pile on the end of a key and says, get on that. So I snort that. We come out of the fire exit. There's a fight going off by the door. We go to the door. The fight's already happened. Head doorman's face is open. So I've just had a massive key. I'm already drunk. And I just said, who did it? And because they were arguing with some lads over the street, and they said, leave it now, it's done. And I was like, I'm not going to do anything. I promise. I swear I'm not going to do anything. Just point to the lad who did that. And somebody did. And so then that was it. I just lost my mind. But the damage was bad. It was like...
Was it just punches and kicks, or did you use weapons?
No, just punches and kicks. But I was kicking people when they're on the floor. Took teeth out, broke the... What's this? Is this the orbital bone? Occipital bone, broke that. One lad needed a graft out of his thigh to restructure his gum so that they could put fake teeth in. They couldn't even put fake teeth in what I'd left. So it was horrible. It was really, really, really bad.
That's years and years of built up anger as well, isn't it?
I was very frustrated. I was very, very angry. And it wasn't this particular group's fault. We were getting pressured. It was a weird time because we were getting pressured by proper gangsters on that door, and we weren't allowed to do anything back. But sometimes you have to let them know they can't be like that. And these weren't reasonable, nice people. And we were being asked to be reasonable and nice with really not nice people, and they should have let us off the leash a little bit.
Fact, you cannot be reasonable with unreasonable people.
True. 100%.
So after you dealt with these lads that put a bottle in your mate's face...
They were the families were chasing me after that.
And you had to pay them off?
Yeah, because one of my lads, fucking shithouse, went in the safe and gave my fucking home address.
And were you living alone at the time or with someone?
I was living on couches in attics. I was moving around. So I had a girlfriend, but it was a very tumultuous relationship. And sometimes I'd be living in my uncle's attic. So it took it to my family. Took it back home to my family. So then I had to let it be known that I wasn't there. And then they were looking for me. So I had to find mutual friends to get in contact with them. And then I had a very uncomfortable few phone calls with the guy's father, just saying like, it's me. Don't go looking for me. That's my family. We can sort this out. Please. I didn't say we can sort this out. I said, please may we sort this out.
But you didn't go to jail.
Didn't go to jail. I was very close. Because I had police in the family and they were like, you're going to get done for attempted murder. And you're going to be looking at proper time in a big man prison. I shit myself. I realised that day that I didn't want to be a gangster at all.
It wasn't for you.
No. I'd watched all the films and I was listening to hip hop and all that stuff. And I was like, I think I've been a very silly little boy. The prospect of actually going to a proper prison was more terrifying than anything else. And like getting, because I'd heard from some of my mates, it depends on what you're in for. It depends on, you know more about it than I do. What if I get 23-hour a day lockup? I was like, I can't do it. I fucking am not made of that stuff. I can't do it. Well, why don't you just go and attack them? I was like, this isn't a film. That's not how this is going to play out. I'm not going to make it fucking worse.
Yeah, if it's not your world, it's not your world.
No. And I knew that there was a week where I didn't sleep because I was terrified. And I was terrified for my family. I was terrified for the potential outcome because I have uncles who look like me. And I was like, what the fuck? Well, how is it going to be if one of my uncles gets hurt because of something I've fucking done? I was absolutely shitting myself. And the other side of shitting myself was, what if all of this is called into the police? So yeah, it was a very, very, very sobering moment.
Yeah, I've had a few of them.
Yeah.
Did you stop working the door after that or continue?
I should say respectfully to that family that like when I apologized, it was a sincere apology. It was too much. It was excessive. And to be honest with you, I think in the initial anger, like he wanted to kill me. But after about 48 hours, because I wasn't that much older than his son, I was like 25, his son was 21 when it happened. And he went from, I absolutely fucking want to kill this guy to, okay, we need to sort this out another way. And so he was all right in the end because he didn't have to be reasonable. So what did I do? I went to Tenerife and I lived with a family in Tenerife who featured in a documentary called Looking for Ricky, which is a story about a guy who went from Manchester and who ended up disappearing in Tenerife because he got involved with the crime scene out there. It was remade into a series on Netflix called White Lines. and was set in Ibiza. But the real story is, and the documentary's still out there. It's called Looking for Ricky. But the Chinese family that they interview in Looking for Ricky was the family. They're from Liverpool. They took me in when I was I wasn't like running away, but I just couldn't be in Liverpool for a while. And I just said to everybody who was in Tenerife, I was like, no matter what happens, never offer me cocaine. I'm the no cocaine guy. I'll drink with you, but don't do it in front of me, please, because it sets me off. And that worked. For 6 months, I was working the door in Tenerife. And you know what it's like in holiday resorts in some summer season. You get 6 nights a week if you want it. You can have 6 nights on the door. So I was on Veronica's.
Rough over there?
Fucking hell. I mean, in the end, I was showing up to work with one of my hands bound in boxing wrap because of it was just crazy. But that's Brits abroad, isn't it? You know, they have a week to go absolutely fucking mental. They're on badly cooked Coke and Stella, and they're firmed up. They bang into another firm who are in the same bar, and there's just no reasoning with people.
And by this stage, because you're now no stranger to violence at all, did it become more of a comfortable place to be? Didn't faze you at all?
Wasn't asked. And I was always, you know, I still had that private school background, so I could put on a bit of charm when I was talking to the boss or the bar managers. I understood the industry by then, understood how bars worked, and I was very clear in my head, you know, we're here to sell alcohol. We want to provide a safe environment in which all these kids can get shit-faced and make as much money as possible for the bar. So I stayed on people's good side. Wasn't a shit house. Never disappeared to the toilets when it went off. The opposite, I put myself front and centre because I was in Liverpool. I was from the Wirral and I was young, and I was private school educated, so my accent wasn't right. I didn't look right. I didn't look the part. I didn't look like I should fucking be there. So my way around that was just to fucking throw myself into everything. Just be in there first. Push the lads out the way. I don't even think that's tough. It's like a cheat. You know, it's a very easy way of gaining trust in a highly confrontational environment, is just be the first one in.
Here's a question for you then. So people that have been abused from a very young age, they tend to end up self-soothing, self-harming, an all number of ways to cope and block out the pain. And up until this point now, you've mentioned self-soothing. You've not mentioned self-harming. So is it safe to say that you never took that route of cutting yourself with?
A couple of times. I'd cut myself, I'd hit myself. But the best way is snort a line of coke, get on the door, and find some big scouser who's going to punch the fuck out of you.
See, I was asked this question, and the person that was asking me the questions, she'd self-harmed previously. She was abused as a child. And she asked me at the start of the conversation, you know, did you ever turn to self-harming? And I was like, no, never crossed my mind. Self-soothing, yep, I clocked out to pornography. I clocked out to everything you can imagine, but self-harming has never been my thing. And then later on down the line, we were talking about violent situations I've been in, which I lost count as a teenager, and then working the door. And I don't normally share these stories because don't want to come on the internet and talk about the old war stories. It's not my bag, but I've had 101. And I used to happily run into groups of people and fight more than one person at once. And then she said to me, that's the self-harming.
Yeah.
And it never dawned on me that fighting multiple men, the chances are you're going to lose. But you're going in, you're not caring. She said to me, that's the self-harming. And I'd never thought about it. And I thought, yeah, she's probably right.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
100%. There was something, it was sadomasochistic for me. I'm definitely going to tell you more in this interview. I don't even know if I told my fucking therapist this. So the book that I released is called The Cult of One. In the first chapter of that book, I described getting my jaw broken. And the reason I got my jaw broken is because I was in a fight. And what I used to do in the beginning of a fight is I'd let them get the first few digs in. And I'd be like, go on, hit me again. Right, you fucking I'm going to fucking kill you now. But I couldn't get there unless they hit me a few times. But this one time I let a guy do it. And he was a Greek army boxer. He caught me in the jaw and I went, hey, it doesn't usually click like that. So now my jaw doesn't close symmetrically. My jaw's slightly off that way. And eventually because I'd let people hit me in the head a few times, Eventually, the bag around my brain burst, and spinal fluid came out through my nose. I used to do it in sparring. I used to do it on the door. I just let people hit me. So in sparring, I was young. I just didn't realize how fragile the body is. So my tactic of intimidation.
You're meant to be the voice of reason in this room.
I'm meant to be the voice of reason.
You're meant to be the professional.
Look, I was a lot younger then. So in sparring, I'd be like the same thing. Go and fucking hit me then. Go and hit me then. And if I was with my mates, whatever, I wouldn't batter them afterwards. But I'd take pleasure in being hit. And I'd just stand there and smile and just I'd walk people down. There's a guy who does that now. He's a Thai guy. I think he's called Rod Tang. And he's got a name for letting people bang him in the head. And I really want to email him and just say, can you please stop? Because it's easy to break and it's impossible to recover. Like the damage I've done to my brain, I'll never recover from. I'm always going to be at a risk for meningitis. I'll always be at a risk for stroke now. I've had my head checked a couple of times. So the plate that protects your brain, there's a bone behind your nose that protects your brain from viral infection. Mine broke. I had multiple hairline fractures going from the front all the way around my skull. And then this sac around your brain, once it's split, it's always vulnerable. So I still spar sometimes. I sparred yesterday, but we're dabbing at each other. It's like we're super, super, super light sparring we do now. Super light sparring. But that was it. I'd absolutely self-harm in the sparring. I'd let people mash my brains. And in a street fight, I fucking loved it. There was something, say sadomasochistic, there was something perverse and almost sexual about it. I'd be like, go and hit me again. Go on, hit me. Yeah, you think you can fucking hit me? And then I'd be all over them. And the typical response would be like, fucking hell, get him off me. I'm trying to bite them. I'm like, gouging them in the fucking eyes and stuff. But no, I liked it. I liked it. You throw a bit of alcohol, steroids, cocaine in the mix. Boss, I was having a great time. The lads I was working with, fucking whinging scousers, every fucking night would whinge. And they were like, you fucking love it, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I do love this. Because I'd done other jobs. I'd clean toilets for a living, and I used to clean laboratories, which was a weird and horrible job. I used to do fencing when I was a kid. I worked as, digging square holes and mixing concrete by hand. We were just standing there looking at birds, and it wasn't even every night in Liverpool. It would be every third night it would go off. Most of the time you just stood there doing nothing. Tenerife was a bit more active.
And when did the stint working the door in Tenerife come to an end?
I think the season ended, and then I went back to Liverpool. I didn't know what to do. Worked as a taxi driver. Hated that, but did it.
And by this stage, the beef with that family had been squashed?
Yeah, I called and checked. I just said, I didn't call directly. I called through mutual people. I was like, am I all right if I walk through Liverpool? Yeah, it's done. I'm taxiing. I'll also be taxiing in Liverpool. It's done. Okay. It's over. It's done. Okay, sound. So taxied, eventually got my operator's license and started my own little business, chauffeuring people. And then one of my mates said to me, who I've known for a long time, I used to go around to his house and he was into crystal bowls, ringing a crystal bowl and Buddhist chanting. He taught me Hindu chanting, meditation. And he was like, do you want to work in school with kids? And I was like, no, I fucking don't. These teenagers, naughty teenagers, just go into the school and we deliver a motivational seminar to them. I was like, do I want to do that? That sounds like shit.
And are you late 20s now?
I'm 26, 27 by now, I think. And he talked me into it. I tried it. I was absolutely shit. The kids ripped me apart. And I was like, I think I'll have another go with that. So I started videoing myself doing the seminar. And then I'd go into another school and do it again. And it was good money. At the time, it was 250 quid after tax for the day. And
when you were doing the talks at schools, what was your angle, your approach? What was your message?
So I worked for a company, and I won't name them. They would be they'd give me a course to deliver, and it was dog shit. It was fucking memory exercises, the goofiest, in rough schools. They were memory exercises and mnemonics and all this bullshit. So I just developed my own course. Whilst I was in the schools, I'd just do my own thing. I would teach them NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, self-hypnosis, how to tell if somebody was attracted. Because as teenagers, they only care about being cool and sex. So then I'd have to give them education. I'd have to start it where they were at. And then we'd get into like motivational strategies. What do you want your life to look like? What do you want your life to be about? And then in the back end, I'd be able to give them something that would be useful for school, you know. And the kids responded really well to me, really, really well. They would leave other classes to come and join my class.
Because you come at them on the level.
Absolutely. So they're going to act the way I treat them. I figured that out early on. If I treat them like young, responsible adults who are going through some shit, because some of them were, many of them they had horrible lives, that's how they're going to act. If I treat them like naughty kids, then they're going to be naughty kids. So I just level with them and be like, this is what it is. And they go, well, we think GCSEs are shit. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a very good way of assessing your talents and your capabilities in life. But this is the system we're working with, mate. What do you want to do? You know, you want me to tell you it's amazing and it's going to guarantee you a job. I'm not going to lie to you. You know perfectly well it's not going to do that. But you can either have it or not have it. What do you want to do? So ended up doing it for about 5 years and was good at it. Really loved it. Really loved it. And I felt like it was karma. It was karma. I needed to pay back because I'd been a bellend for about 7 years, just snorting and fighting and shagging random women in Liverpool nightclubs.
Yeah, I bet you've done a fair bit of that.
Yes. How could I say no?
Yeah. So was that the moment you realised that you like helping people?
Yes, and that I can help people and that I can do something useful. Because I felt useless. Like from the moment they fucked me off from the degree and they wouldn't even interview me, I was like, all of this is bullshit. None of this means anything. I was totally nihilistic. And then...
Just put more anger in you.
Yeah, I was just angry. I was fucking pissed off. And then when I looked at these kids... They didn't have behavioural issues. They'd been abused. But there was only so much I could do for them. They were struggling. They were really struggling.
Were they abused in a way that you could relate to?
Some of them were abused in a way that I could relate to. Some of them were just from shit homes. They were just, they'd be like, oh, this kid, he doesn't concentrate, he won't listen. And I'd be like, all right, mate, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Oh, packet of Monster Munch and a Red Bull. And I'd be like, okay, do you think this 14-year-old central nervous system is going to sit and listen to that boring talk about mathematics and sit in a chair? It's torture. It's torture. The education system is completely fucked. A lot of these kids are fucked. Some of them it was sexual abuse, and some of them are just from very, very low income families where there's drug abuse. The mum's brassing herself off. She can't stay in the house while her mum's got her customers in the house. And then my company's going, teach her a fucking mnemonic.
This is a side of life that some people can't even imagine to be real.
Yeah.
And that goes on up and down the country. When you said someone's mum brassing themselves off,
yeah,
I know these people.
Yeah,
I know that there's families out there where the parents or the mum will make the child leave the house so she can work, lay on her back and have people have sex with her multiple times throughout the day so she can get money, which is normally to feed her drug habit, and the children get utterly neglected, and then they go on to live. They just don't have a head start.
Well, they're just raised on street corners. And, their cliques bring them up, the local drug dealers bring them up, the street brings them up. And then the school, the establishment, in its naivety says, oh, she's got a behavioural issue, he's got a behavioural issue. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You'd have a fucking behavioural issue if you did that for 24 hours. You'd be traumatised if you lived that kid's life for 24 hours. Like, there's nothing wrong with this child.
They've got a neglect issue.
It's a neglect issue. It's a neglect issue. I feel for the teachers. They're in a terrible situation. The education system's in a terrible situation. I'm talking about things that happened in 2009. It's not like it's any better now. But I'd stand in a classroom with kids not fed properly, not raised properly, full of fucking energy drinks. And the noise was overwhelming. The noise that they just make. And they're just sat there. They're just not, this is a normal classroom. It's illegal to record, but I think people sat at home watching this would be stunned at the amount of noise schools see as being normal, and then they say your kid should learn in that. And there's literally, I'd be looking around the room, and there's kids like rocking and just going, and just shouting because there's so much noise and it's echoing. So all these kids are fucking full of energy drinks. They're not fed properly. They're not raised properly. They don't know how to sit still, and they just freak the fuck out. Some schools I had to spend, it would take me, and I'm talking like, I didn't really work that much with 14-year-olds. I'd work with 16-year-olds and up. But it could take me 2 hours to get them to settle down. 2 hours. 2 fucking hours just to get them to be calm. Just calm enough to listen to me for a couple of hours. It was awful.
You know, the whole time you're doing this, so your journey working the doors in Liverpool, then Tenerife, then coming back, then teaching and helping children. Because I know we're just about to come to the part where your dad gets convicted for historical child sex abuse. What was happening in the background with you and your dad during that period of time?
He was stealing money from me. He would set up businesses. I felt very sorry for him. Like I feel sorry for everybody who's ever predated upon me for some twisted reason, probably because of childhood, because he inculcated that in me. So after he was divorced from my mother, he was broke and he lived in a shithole in Birkenhead. And I'd try and help him in business, and then he would just steal the money. He stole money from me that was paid to me from schools. He had a joint account with me, and somehow he got a check for 500 quid, which would have been 2 school days, that said Richard Grannon on it, and then took it into the joint account, paid it in, and then withdrew all the cash. And I was like, that's literally money that I've earned teaching kids. And he was like, oh, it was a mistake. I was like, you've gone through a few fucking steps there to make that mistake. No, he was a thief.
It's kind of like constant control over you he wants.
Yeah, constant control. And I have to say, in fairness to that side of the family, he was raised in what was borderline a slum in Birkenhead. Well, we don't know exactly. We think that his father was from a travelling family, and he was raised in an orphanage, and his father was badly abused in a Catholic orphanage, and so he was not nice to his kids. He was not nice, and they were raised in a really, really rough environment where, I don't know, I think all of the empathy and kindness and authenticity was probably just beaten and abused out of my father.
Do you forgive your dad for what he's done to you?
Do I forgive him? I forgive him, but what he did stands. It stands. It happened. And the time that he did in prison is not enough.
So let's get to the nuts and bolts of him getting arrested. How did it all come about?
The first we heard about it was I got a call from the police, and I thought it was about something that I'd done years before, or something to do with door work or something, and no, it was about him. And then the police wanted to come around and do interviews and stuff, but I didn't testify, and neither did my sister.
Wow. So who were the victims that testified?
2 of my half-sisters testified.
So he couldn't keep his hands off anyone?
No, and I don't think, I mean, he's old now. I don't think we'll ever know for sure.
What the full extent
of what he was doing and to who, and because there was accusations and rumours. And
what was he convicted for?
It was rape, violent and repeated rape.
On children?
Yeah.
And how long did he get in jail?
Because he refused to plead guilty.
As they do.
Yeah, he just refused, even though he admitted guilt to my sister. When my sister asked him about it, he said, well, those are the times, that's just what you did. So he ended up getting 9 years.
Did you visit him?
No. 2 years before the police officer had even called me, I'd cut him out of my life because he just kept on robbing from me and he was doing my fucking head in. And I was like, I've tried to help you for years. You're a prick.
Did your life take a different direction after that? Or did you stick to the path?
So what sort of helped me was getting into a lot of trouble on the door. That sobered me up. Being able to work in the schools, and then I set up my own business online teaching self-defense that started in 2006, and then that slowly grew. That had helped. I went to therapy. That had helped. Him getting convicted, because he was out of my life. He was, it was like, okay, good. I was glad. I've seen him around a couple of times, like when they released him. I've seen him as I've been driving around Birkenhead or whatever. I've seen him out and about a couple of times, but not that much. But I know what you're asking me is like the fact that it came into reality, that it was recognized that he was a deviant. Did it help? I don't know. Something about, I don't know. I just feel indifferent about it.
Yeah, I get that.
I don't know what I want to have happen to him. I don't know whether I want him to be shot or if I wanted violence or.
What was that sort of eureka moment where you thought, I'm gonna put this narcissism mindset under the microscope?
So when I was 30, I got into a relationship with a girl. So my father is white Irish, and I don't know, like let's say around that time that this happened, he would have been 65. When I was 30, I found a 24-year-old Malaysian Chinese girl who was a manifestation of him. And I did 2 years with her, and it was horrendous. But she was him. And the point about mentioning ethnicities and age difference and cultural differences is there's really no difference. You can, if you're carrying that, so I do transactional analysis therapy. If you're carrying that script inside of you and that archetype inside of you, that's what you find. So I found my father in a 24-year-old Chinese Malaysian girl. She was raised in the world. She was raised where I'm from. So
when you say she was a manifestation of him, are we talking aggressive, hypersexual?
She was the con artistry side of him, the constant lying, constant lying, incredibly superficial, very histrionic, very obsessed with her own sexual attractiveness. My father's objectively, I suppose, would be considered a good-looking guy and spent his entire life using that to his advantage, probably trying to prove that he's not gay. He slept with a lot of women. He was constantly seducing women. And she was like that. She was highly promiscuous and very obsessed with sex.
What does histrionic mean? I've never heard that.
So in the cluster B spectrum of disorders, in the this is the American definition, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual from the American Psychiatric Association, you have antisocial, which is the new term kind of for psychopathy, narcissism, borderline, and histrionic. So the histrionic engages in very overtly childish and theatrical displays. They tantrum, and they tend to be very, very focused on their sexual attractiveness. And they're constantly creating scenes and looking for attention. They are actors. They act out. They're very dramatic. Everybody in the cluster B is dramatic,
right? But
they're the most dramatic.
And would she do things to trigger jealousy purposefully?
All the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very nasty trait.
It was very, very stressful for me. And I just wasn't equipped to deal with it. I was 30, so I wasn't a kid, but I hadn't experienced that with a girl before, playing all these games. I'd had bad girlfriends. I had girls who were into drugs, or they were depressed, or they had some issue, but it was within a normal range. It was only when I cut my father out of my life and went, okay, he's gone, then I found somebody to replace him who was sick in the way that he was sick.
Did you find out more about narcissism in the same way people that follow you found out about narcissism?
Yes, I followed their track.
You started questioning the relationship, the behaviour that you couldn't quite put your finger on.
Yes.
And then you started researching. So what was the first, maybe not so much personality trait, but what were some of the things you couldn't work out?
I wish I could remember, but I know, because I know the place where I was living at the time, and I remember looking on the laptop and ending up on a narcissism forum, but I don't know what I put in to end up on a narcissism forum. I must have put in, my girlfriend always lies to me, or there was something about her where she would tell you things and spin a narrative that was this way, but clearly the reality she was living was a very different reality. So she was two-faced. Three-faced, four-faced, five faces. I never saw all of her fucking faces. So I don't know the search term, but I know I ended up on a narcissism forum.
So from 32 up until now, has life been a progression of success for you?
Life has not been a progression of success, no. I split up with her, and then I got into another 2 narcissistically abusive relationships, and each narcissistically abusive relationship was worse than the one that went before it. So whilst I've been teaching people how to overcome narcissism, I've been in narcissistically abusive relationships.
Is that common?
Nobody's going to tell me because we're all ashamed. But I suspect so. There's a kind of work that, like, knowledge won't help you. Knowing about this shit isn't going to help you. Because, well, if we go back to what we said at the beginning, we're all children. We all project. We all live inside of our fantasies. I could teach you, I could download, like in the Matrix, everything I know about narcissistic abuse into your head. But if I bring another woman into the space under the right circumstances who pushes the right buttons for you, you'll be like, she's amazing. And I'll go, there's a little bit of narcissism there. No, not her. She's eccentric. That's just the way she is. You'll make excuses for her. Because there's blind spots. We all have blind spots. All humans have blind spots. The only way around this is to resolve the root cause of this. We're reliving our childhood trauma. We're reliving the deception and the betrayal and the pain again and again.
So you've been in 3 adult relationships that have been abusive and narcissistic.
Yes, that first one with the Chinese girl, like, she was young. It wasn't great. She cheated on me. She lied a lot. She was young. And when I look back on it, so there's borderline personality disorder. And this is one of the things that makes it controversial, is we know that people who've been diagnosed with BPD can grow out of it. So I would say with her, she was young, she's pretty, and she's foreign. So that gives her an extra level of specialness in it, because the world is very white. Where I'm from is white, especially when we were growing up. So she was unique. So she was being given an awful lot of narcissistic supply. So with her, I would think life would probably fix her. She probably wouldn't need therapy. So I don't know what happened to her once I split up with her. But let's say at age 30, she gets with a guy. Age 32, she has a kid. Age 34, she has a second kid. She's now in a stable relationship with a guy who's not going to leave her. She feels secure because her father left when she was young, and she has 2 children who love her unconditionally. She'll probably be okay. The other 2 really need help.
So if you've been in 2 genuine narcissistically abusive relationships, have you found new red flags, or is there like a standard set that you should be looking out for? Or do you not even see them?
I kind of am moving away from that category. It's a very, very correct way to think about it. Like, what we're saying is 2 people get into a relationship. One person might not realize it's dangerous. How the fuck are they going to figure out it's dangerous? The way I would approach it is I would say, you know, I said it earlier, like the tip of the iceberg is narcissistic abuse, but the real iceberg is childhood trauma and sexual trauma. So what I would say to somebody is, do you know what you want? Not in your life, not in your job, not in your friendships, but from an intimate partner. That's a very unique style of relationship. It's a very important style of relationship. Do you know to a nicety what you want, what you will stand for and what you won't stand for? Do you know what your boundaries are? Do you know what your limits are? Do you know what your expectations are? If that's vague and open, you're open to being abused. This is a highly narcissistic culture. Narcissistic abuse can manifest in multiple forms from multiple personality disorders. What do we mean when we say there's narcissistic abuse? We're basically saying it's not fair. One person's doing some exploiting and the other person's being exploited. The balance of the relationship isn't right. One person's having a great time and the other person's suffering. So what will you tolerate? What won't you tolerate? Where are your boundaries? And your boundaries are yours, whatever they are. Whatever your expectations and drives and whatever, they're yours. You're not going out and demanding the world do the things you want them to do. What you're saying is, if person X, this lady, wants to enter your most intimate spaces, for you, this is the only way it's going to play out. This is the only way. These are the things you can do. These are the things I cannot have you do because I'm an adult and I have to look after myself. That's the proper way. Red flags would be if people are struggling with you on that. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's a ridiculous boundary. Why have you got a boundary around that? Have you ever thought not having a boundary around that? That's a red flag. If somebody says this is the way intimate, romantic, deep relationships need to play out for me, then that's it. It's absolute. You have to respect that. And the respect goes both ways. If
we look at grandiose narcissism and covert narcissism, so for me, a grandiose narcissist is quite easy to spot. Polishing their own halo for too long, talking about themselves, yawning while you're talking about yourself when it's your turn to speak, eyes glaze over. They're the best thing since sliced bread. They zero empathy, disregard your feelings, emotions, will talk over you, want to be centre of attention. They're the main star of the show and everybody else is an extra. And to me, it seems obvious because my dad is a grandiose narcissist. He has NPD without a shadow of a doubt. He would walk into someone's front room. You would feel like the guest in your own house. He'd start talking over you. He'd start dancing in the front room. Grandiose, so easy to spot. So how would you describe, in your professional opinion, a grandiose narcissist? These subtypes that are not really official, but there's broad consensus that there are two subtypes. We say grandiose overt, covert, fragile narcissist. But even the grandiose is still fragile. Even the grandiose is compensatory. Even the grandiose is trying to make up for their insecurities. So I'm not sure anymore that the subtypes function all that well, except for us to say externally, all narcissists are fragile. This one is being noisy about it, and this one's being a sneaky fucker. This one's being noisy about it. This is the thing I would usually say. The one who's being noisy about it, the extrovert, grandiose narcissist, they have a false self and they believe they deserve special attention and special treatment from people. And largely speaking, they can convince the world that they're right. They can convince the world that they're true, that's true. So the environment around them says, yes, you deserve special attention. The sneaky, fragile or covert narcissist absolutely believes just as much as the grandiose that they deserve special attention, but they fail to convince the people around them that they do. So they get a lot more negative feedback from the environment. So where if your dad had been like, I'm walking to the front of the queue here and that's what's happening, fuck off. And people just went, okay, scary guy, we're going to let him do it. He can now afford to live in narcissistic elation. And so he's grandiose and extroverted. If somebody else had tried that and gone, I'm walking to the fucking front of the queue here, and the grannies in the queue went, no, you fucking not, you mag. Get to the fucking back. That's narcissistic depletion. That's narcissistic injury. He has to be sneaky. So this one has his fantasies and can live them most of the time. This one has his fantasies but can't live them most of the time. This one has an active, ready source of narcissistic supply. So they're full, like a parasite, like a tick. They're full of blood. This one's like a junkie. You can never quite get the amount and the quality a junkie's looking for. He's starving. He's hungry. So he or she has to pretend to be nice. They have to make allowances. They have to make these little gestures of consent. They have to apologize. They have to show vulnerability. They have to be nice because but there's no difference in the personality disorder. They can afford to do it and these can't. And I think what happens is a lot of that is contingent on external circumstances. So if this one goes from being a rock star to, I don't know, think of a rock star who lost everything because of some scandal and then they're a burnout, that's somebody who's then going to go from grandiose narcissism to vulnerable narcissism. The narcissism remain the same. But what we can see is when he was a rock star at the top of his game and everybody loved him, he could be a noisy fucker and bully people. When nobody gave a shit about him and everybody hated him, he had to be a sneaky fucker. Who does he extract narcissistic supply from now? He has to coerce weak people, damaged people, very anxious, very neurotic, very nervous, very introverted people into his circle and cling onto them. He doesn't want to feed off them. He wants a nice, high-quality
supply, but he makes do with what he can get hold of. We're in the vampire movies where the vampire will try not to eat humans because they fall in love with a human or some fucking thing or other. They try to eat rats. They try to eat cats. And they can survive a little bit on rats and cats, but they get sick because they really need a human being to feed off. It's the same thing. The narcissist needs high-grade supply.
What is narcissistic supply?
Undue applause, adoration, and attention. Undue.
Right.
It's if I coerce from you, you telling me that I'm wonderful in some way. Put me on a pedestal and then tell me I'm wonderful. I'm manipulating you, tricking you, lying to you, bullying you into doing that for me. Then I can get my narcissistic supply.
And what's their ultimate goal? Is it control? You and me are sat here, for example. I've got no urge to control the environment. I've got no urge to try and put you on the back foot by responding to something you haven't said. So you then say to me, oh, I didn't say that. You're now answering to me because I've responded to something you haven't said. So I've got no urge to try and control this environment. I just want a conversation to flow, give and take. I suppose we're supplying each other with decent energy. Whereas I've been in situations before where, and I think there'll be relationships out there where this happens more often than people realise, and they can't quite put their finger on why they're being tied up in knots. They're just having a conversation, but all of a sudden it becomes a disagreement and a row, and someone's getting off, someone's getting fueled by the other person's anger, and it's completely unnecessary. So we'll be having a conversation, and I'll just say, you know, I saw a chihuahua on the side of the road, and then you say, yeah, that Alsatian you said that you saw, and then I'll say, no, I never said Alsatian. Yeah, you did. So, I didn't. I said chihuahua, and then the gaslighting proceeds.
This is triggering me. It feels like I'm talking to my ex right now.
But so where I've been in conversations like that, maybe not quite as obvious as a chihuahua and Alsatian, because covert
I've done that one.
but they're very clever, I've found. But I'm trying to work out, where's the mileage? Where's this conversation going? Why are you getting fueled by my agitation? The only thing I can think of, the conclusion is you just want to control this environment, but there's no reason to control it. I don't get it. And it's confusing, and I've probably confused everyone listening.
No, I think it's a great question. There is control there, but upstream of control, there's a couple of things that are going on. So for narcissistic personality disorder to be a narcissistic personality disorder, this is me going away from the clinical research. This is my hypothesis. It's a personality disorder that is as much of dissociation and psychotic delusion as it is anything else. I'm a narcissist. When I was a child, my childhood was so fucking awful, I couldn't cope with it. So I chose that this reality is too painful. I'm going to live in fantasy land. In this reality, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I'm somebody's slave, I'm a garbage bin. In this reality, I'm a king amongst men. I'm the best person. I might be the only person. I've chosen fantasy. So that's how sick they are. As I'm talking to you, I'm taking your words, your body language and everything, and I'm molding it into my fantasy, which means if I'm in an intimate relationship with somebody, I'm never interacting with you. I'm not interested in you. I'm interested in absorbing. So imagine there's a force field around me. This is my narcissistic shell. Reality comes through. I distort, delete, and generalize who and what comes through to fit my narcissistic fantasy. You never get in. A version of you, an avatar of you gets in that I can control and that I can manipulate. You mentioned control. Why do I need to control and manipulate it? Because I'm obsessed with my fantasy. If I lose my fantasy, it's like death. But my fantasy is death-like. I don't want an alive person. I want the dead version of you. The alive version of you challenges me. But I hold a dead snapshot of you inside of my head, an image, an avatar, a dead avatar of you that does exactly what I tell it to do. I like Liam. I like him like this. Who are you? What do you fucking want? That's how sick it is. You're not important, but you have to stay here to keep my dead version of you going. You can't leave. Because you might say, well, you don't fucking need me. Just sit there and wank over your fantasy then, love. No. You're fucking going nowhere. I need you right here. I need you right here like this. Because you said one of the things that I heard in your question is, why would somebody want to keep a miserable, confrontational relationship going? If you're that angry with me, that you're going to play these stupid mind games and claim that it was an Alsatian when I know and you know that it was a Chihuahua. Both adults here know that it was a Chihuahua, and I know that you know that, and you're still going to say Alsatian. It's power play. And it's to let herself know and to let you know you don't matter. You're nothing. And how does it make you feel? It makes you feel like you're fucking nothing. And then you're angry because it's extremely disrespectful because you're like a used dildo. That's how it makes you feel. And that's deliberate. It's to put you in the bin. You said, what's the ultimate goal of narcissism? There isn't really any end goal. It's like this endless fucking desert, an endless torture house in a desert. And you can't leave, but I need to live my life perpetually pushing you away and perpetually disrespecting you and perpetually hating you. I love hating you. Do I want you to leave? No. Do I want to get with a man who makes me feel good? I don't feel good. What the fuck are you talking about? Get with a man who's your equal. Get with a man whose values you share. Get with a man who makes you happy. I'm fucking interested in being happy. I want to win. And in this situation, I win. Me master, you slave. Shut up. Take it. And that's the name of the game. Is there an end goal? Some people would say the end goal would be to destroy the partner as a form of individuation, because they're essentially kind of stuck with an internalized version of their mother, like a smothering mother, and they'll try and destroy the partner as a way of winning the ultimate game. So if I destroy you, you're almost a sacrifice to this narcissistic God, this evil God that I'm holding inside of me. One more thing, and I know it's kind of weird and poetic and a bit creepy, but when it comes to narcissism, we have to understand they are also beholden to narcissism. So inside of them, there's no ego. There's just, so you know about the 3 states from Freud, the superego, the ego, and the id. They can't stop the impulses from the id because there's no ego. They can't stop the negative injunctions from the superego because there's no ego. So what they end up with is a very, very vicious, demanding, internal, demonic God who demands blood sacrifice. And I have to sacrifice you. Because if I don't sacrifice you, it's fucking me. And that's why, that's going to sound really weird to people who haven't lived it, but you felt all of the aggression, all of the persecution, all of the fucking vitriol and vindictiveness, the sadism. She knows you're going crazy, right? She sat there watching you fucking twitch and being like, fucking hell, I'm going to end up going to jail here. She knows what she's doing. Why is she doing it? She has to persecute you because she's persecuted. The introject, the internalized narcissistic introject is demanding that from her to keep the fantasy alive. Do you want to live in the fantasy world as the golden princess that everybody loves? Yes, please. Kill him. Well, I killed him yesterday. Well, he's reborn again today. Kill him again. Kill him again. If it's not him, it's going to be you. And that introject will come for her. Well, that's what happens with covert narcissists. And we know this. Clinically, the definition, the way that clinicians would offer the subtype of covert narcissism is they'll say the covert, vulnerable narcissist deals with tremendous feelings of shame that the grandiose doesn't. And this is through conversations and interrogations that they've done with clinicians. What that means is that the internal introject eats the covert narcissist alive. It tortures them. It tortures them. Whereas for the grandiose, it doesn't. Why? Because it can gain narcissistic supply. It can keep that inner God satiated. This one fails. And that persecutory demonic God starts to persecute and eat them. So they're riddled with shame. And the shame they experience is for their delusional grandiose fantasies. I said a lot. That was a little bit confusing, but I hope I helped.
People can just replay that several times, as many times as they need to. So when you're dealing with a narcissist, be it grandiose or covert, it's very easy to say no contact, because that's really how you have to deal with them. Based on my research, there's no other way.
100%.
No other way.
Yeah.
It's no contact, and that's the bottom line. So if you think you can toy and tease and play games with a narcissist, you're going to lose every time. And it's you that gets damaged because they're feeding off that whilst you're basically disintegrating as a human being.
Yeah.
off the back of that.
You're being fed on.
Yeah. But if you're in the absolute grip of a narcissistic relationship and you haven't got the strength at the moment to go no contact.
I've worked with the victims of narcissistic abuse. And very often when they come to you and they say, oh, that's the problem, I have to have contact with him. I have to have contact with her. Yes, sometimes in the real world there is contact because you run a business together or you have shared custody together. But most of the time the problem is an internal one. They can't stop contacting them. And they'll come to a psychologist and say, she keeps contacting me. And actually you're both contacting each other because we're damaged and it's a trauma bond and you're addicted. They've drawn you into their matrix-like simulation of reality and they've gotten you hooked. So living without them is painful. It creates obsession and anxiety and sometimes rage, and it's very uncomfortable, and it creates a huge amount of cognitive dissonance. So the person can't even just rest inside their own body. Cognitive dissonance is like a somatically felt feeling of discomfort where you have two separate parts of your mind are moving in two different directions. So you would have experienced this. People watching it would have experienced this. Part of you knows very well that you're in an abusive relationship, but the part of you that's colonized by her is saying, no, you're not. She's abusive. This is what she did. No, she didn't. You made her do that. This is her. This is you. But it's internal now. So even if she disappears or, heaven forfend, dies or goes to another planet, you still carry that inside of you because of the abuse. And that therapeutic work is to get that part out, that colonized part of your brain out. So it's very, very uncomfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable. So we reach to the narcissist for an end to that cognitive dissonance. Like, hopefully if I have contact with them, I'll feel okay again. And maybe you will for an hour or two until the cycle starts again.
So to me, that doesn't sound like love. It sounds like more of an addiction.
It's definitely not love.
If you think of your narcissistic partner as a substance, and like any other addiction, you think going back to the substance is going to numb the pain, but instead it just makes it even worse.
Yeah.
But then you need more of it to balance yourself out.
Yes.
That's heavy shit.
Very heavy and very, very difficult to drag people out of. It's not love. None of this has anything to do with love. Love doesn't act like this. Love doesn't feel like this. Well, most of the love songs that you've ever enjoyed and that I've ever enjoyed, they're not about love. They're about trauma bonds. Love's not like that. That's not what love is. That's power play. That's limerence. That's fantasy. That's something quite dark and coming out of the unconscious.
And what is a typical trauma bond?
Well, trauma bonding is one of the terms that we've borrowed from cult psychology. So what would happen in a cult is the cult leader would take the target, abuse them, and then put them in a situation of abuse and then be the one to rescue them from the situation of abuse. So they might lock the target inside of a cupboard, not give them any food and water for 12 hours, scream at them, tell them they'd failed the cult, that they were an outsider, that they were, I don't know, a heathen or whatever you say inside of a cult. And then the same cult leader unlocks the cupboard, gives them water, gives them food, speaks to them gently and kindly, and the brain is just going, what the fuck is this? What do I do with this? You regress, the ego boundaries start to corrode, and you infantilize, you go back to childhood. So then you're seeing that one person as both persecutor and savior, demon and angel in one. And it's very, very powerful with what that does to the brain. The rewiring in the brain is insane. The neural connection that you're making basically says this person is godlike, which is why cults use it, which is why narcissists use it. Abuse them, reward them. Abuse them, reward them. Abuse, reward, over and over and over again. Very powerful.
We could literally talk about narcissism for days, not hours, days, because it's far more complex than people think.
It's very complicated.
We've well and truly established that it's not about admiring your reflection. So just tell people where they can find you to find out more about narcissism.
If they want to find out more about narcissism, just put the words Richard Grannon into YouTube or Instagram. There's a ton of information there. And
there really is. Okay, so this is probably a good point to bring people's attention to your social media platforms, because there is so much more to find out. And anyone that's even doubting their relationship or questioning their partner's behaviour, and it's confusing them, making them feel like they're going mad and they're bitterly unhappy and they shouldn't be, and they feel like it's more of an addiction than love. Go to Richard's platform and just explore the whole place.
We have a free e-manual people can get. If they go to richardgrannon.com, they put the email in, and it's up to date. I wrote it this year, and there's a free e-manual they can get that can describe what the experience is that they're having and how to start breaking out from it. There's a good place to start as well.
Great. And is there any prominent figures in the public eye that you suspect has got a narcissistic personality disorder?
It's so hard. It's so hard to say without knowing people or having done therapy with them or spoken to them, because all I'm saying is their public image. There's people who act in crazy ways, for sure. I look at Keir Starmer and I'm like, that looks insane. That looks self-destructive, what Keir Starmer's doing. Is it based in a personality disorder? I'd have to spend not just hours, I'd have to spend a couple of days with him to see how he is across context with different people, when he's not putting on an act for my benefit or somebody else's benefit, when he's stressed, when he's tired, and then I'll start to pick up the tells. But it's quite hard to detect.
That's very interesting that you've said Keir Starmer, seeing as he's now running the country. What things has he done that makes you think there could possibly be a problem there?
He responded inappropriately and disproportionately to the civil unrest. It's totally inappropriate. It's totally disproportionate, to the extent that it's what I would consider, from a psychological perspective, that's maladaptive. That's gone into some previously existing trauma or loathing or phobia for a particular group of people, probably white British working class people, it seems. And we obviously now he's being called two-tier Keir, because if this was a family unit and he's the father of the family unit, he's got his special kids who, when they do a bad thing, he treats them like this, and then they would be classed in as the golden child. And then these kids over here, they're the black sheep. When they do the same thing, he totally overreacts. And he's even pulled legitimate actual criminals out of jail to put thought criminals in jail. These people are now political prisoners. 2024 modern UK, we've got political prisoners who are doing hard time with hard people for saying the wrong thing on social media. That's a massive step backwards. That's not a progressive. That's a totalitarian dictator.
So from your point of view, you're seeing a lot of injustice.
Well, with narcissistic abuse, you have an exploiter and an exploitee. In narcissistic family units, you have people who are being treated by different rules. That's sick. It just can't work. Same as in narcissistic cults. I don't like seeing flagrant unfairness. I don't like seeing flagrant injustice. I don't think we can call ourselves a modern Western democracy and continue the narrative, especially the woke virtue signaling narrative, any further and have political prisoners. You can't lock people up for saying words. That has to be a hard fucking boundary. You can't lock people up for telling the truth. You can't lock people up for making a documentary that is truthful. You can pull the documentary apart and say, this is where it's not truthful, but you can't put that fucking person in prison for telling the truth in a documentary and call yourself a modern Western liberal democracy. It's over at that point. So yeah, the injustice gets to me. I'm covertly talking about our friend Tommy.
I was going to say, you've seen Tommy Robinson's documentary.
Seeing the documentary changed my perspective of him 100%, because I thought it's citizen journalism. You know, it's not slick. It's not massively high production, but it's got work. It's got graft in it. And it's, to my eyes, silenced as an attempt by a British citizen to do investigative journalism and then to make a documentary. What is wrong with that? You don't like what's inside of the document, or you can say as the institution, as the establishment, this isn't true, this isn't true, this isn't true. Okay, so let it be known publicly. Tell us what's not true. Show us the clips, timestamp what's not true. Let's have that conversation. You cannot blanket say, do not release this documentary or else we're going to put you in prison. That's completely fucking unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
And you've recently interviewed Tommy, haven't you?
Yes, so I watched Silenced knowing that I'd be interviewing Tommy, or that it was likely at that point 2 weeks later.
Can I ask, what made you want to interview Tommy? And did you have an impression of him before you interviewed him, and has it changed since?
Yes, I thought he was a right-wing racist thug. And I still think that. No, I thought what a lot of people, well, that's not quite true. One part of the story that we never got to, I ended up working for David Icke. I've done documentaries for David Icke and the Icke brothers. And I've done podcasts that are politically controversial, and I've put my politically controversial ideas out there. I had my Instagram account completely deleted for it during the times of the lockdowns. My main narcissism account has 2 strikes against it for medical misinformation. So alternative media is important to me. I grew up on alternative media. I was reading David Icke books when I was, 15, 16 years old. And that doesn't mean I agree with everything he says. Mm. But he has a right to put forward the idea that, the royal family are interdimensional beings. I want to live in a country where he can say that and where we can explore those ideas. He's not being put in prison for it. Alternative media is important. Citizen journalists are important. This is important. What you're doing is important. So I knew that I wasn't being told the truth about Tommy. I knew it was lazy. I knew it was a lazy throwaway thing. You slip Tommy Robinson's face, you put a Union Jack behind it and a pint of lager and some white people, and therefore, and you just let people. And I'm like, I'm not buying that. But I don't know what he does believe. Watch Silenced, and I was like, okay, if you're a racist, you don't say the things that he's saying in that document. He's at pains to say there were 10 other Syrian kids in that school from Syrian families, and everybody thought they were lovely. If he was racist, he wouldn't say that. He'd just say, I'll cut it out. That's stuff that I'm not a qualified therapist, but I've done coaching with people in the realms of psychoanalytic theory. That's stuff that you notice. He could have edited that out, but he says most of the Syrian families who were at that school and most of the kids, they were described as lovely. They integrated. So I'm like, I'm watching that. I'm going, okay, if he's racist, he's a very bad racist. If I ran a racism club, I would kick him out for not being racist enough. So I watched it and I was like, okay, I'm really keen to talk to this guy and I think I can see what's happened. So before I met him, I sent him voice notes and I was like, I know how you're being portrayed. I know what the common branding and the common theme is. I want to do something that just feels a little bit warmer, a little bit more open. I'm not going to learn that much more about you because I want to sit and respond naturally and spontaneously. I'm going to ask questions and you tell me what you're about. And so he did. And he surpassed my expectations. I knew I wasn't going to get what the newspapers said, for fuck's sake, but he surpassed my expectations in terms of his depth of thought, his insight, his care, his sincerity about what he's doing.
And what was your conclusion on Tommy?
In terms of the sincerity of what he's doing?
Just as a human being. I mean, anyone that hasn't met Tommy or interviewed Tommy or done proper research on Tommy, it stands to reason that they're going to believe what the mainstream media have printed for years, that he's a far-right, racist nut job. But you've actually met him and you've asked him tough questions. Okay,
well, he's fucking not far-right. He's centrist and progressive. He's not fucking racist. I tried to find something racist that he'd ever said. My mate Andrew Gold, who's a journalist who has put projects forward for the BBC, tried to find something, couldn't find anything. A thug, well, when I was in my 20s, I've told the stories in this podcast. If you dragged me off the street at age 25, I was a thug. You're a product of your trauma, of your environment. We all have responsibilities. I'm not saying but absolutely at times in his life, he's been a fucking tearaway. As have I. To me, he's like, I'm surprised he's not Scouse, to be honest with you. I mean, like when I sit and chat to him, he's got exactly the same attitude to life that me and the lads that I used to hang around with would have. You know, he's just one of the lads. He's one of the boys, but he's one of the lads, one of the boys who's ended up on this weird life path. And he'll say, he's the first person to say, he's like, I shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be me that's doing this, but there's nobody else to do it. So I'm going to do it is his thing. He's very courageous. He's a very, very, very courageous guy. He's much more courageous than I am.
Have you received any backlash by supporting Tommy?
Yeah, from the type of people you would expect backlash from. I don't give a fuck. And it's nowhere near what I expected. Mm-hmm. It's nowhere near what I expected. I thought that I would be called a right-wing white, blah, 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 supremacist, and all of that. Very little of that. Massive amounts of support. And then a few bleeps and murmurs from some brainwashed fucking zombies who, even the way they write, I haven't even replied to what they've written to. I'm like, you are so inside the matrix. You are so fucking brainwashed. I can't tweet back to you something that's going to wake you up. You'll just see it the way you're going to see it. They've already decided he's a right-wing racist thug because the television told them. And you say, well, show me something that's racist. I don't need to. I just know he is. Well, that to me sounds like a fucking religious belief. So you saying you religiously on faith believe that Tommy Robinson is tainted by the devil? Yes, I do. Okay, well, you're a true believer then, I guess. Good for you.
This was my issue with people that would attack Tommy. And we're talking years ago now. So I've done exactly what you've done. I thought a lot of people are calling him racist. Okay, well, let me see what he's done that's racist. I tried my hardest to find something that would prove that narrative. I couldn't find, and I've said to Tommy on camera, I said, I tried my hardest to find something that you said or done that was racist.
He's a terrible racist. He has friends from all ethnicities. Kick him out of the racism club. He thinks women of different ethnicities are hot. Kick him out of the racism club. In what sense? In what meaningful sense? Is a guy who's lived the life he has and keeps the connections he has and says the words he's saying, in what meaningful sense is he racist? I mean, it's utter fucking gibberish.
Would you say Tommy was kind? Now you know him better.
Yeah, he's kind. Fucking right, he's kind. Yeah, he loves people. He's carrying a lot. He's got demons inside of him. I recognise it because I've got them inside of me. He's got PTSD. I know because I've got PTSD. There's stuff that he's struggling with. But he loves life. He loves people. He's a good guy.
I'm yet to meet anybody that's spent time with him denounce him. Not one person. Once someone's met Tommy and they give him a fair crack of the whip to explain why he says and believes the things that he does, they all see the world from his eyes and they know that they've been fed lies. And they end up quite frustrated.
Oh, God, yeah. The thing is, obviously, there's the demonstration coming up. He's going to be sentenced. It's unfortunate because I'd like to spend more time chatting with him because he actually knows a lot about a very broad range of subjects, and it's all self-taught. He didn't have the benefit of private school. I was sent to private school. He didn't have the benefit of all that, but he knows a lot about a lot of different subjects, and his subjects of interest, he's got depth on them, and he doesn't get the opportunity to talk about them because he's seen through this very, very rigid paradigm, which means he then has to respond through the rigid paradigm with which he's being hit. And it's a real shame, and it's a real injustice. It's a real injustice what's happening at the moment inside of the UK.
If he gets sent to jail, will you feel affected knowing that he's going to be in a cell?
Very affected. I fucking did a whole hour's therapy session on it yesterday. I'm fucking worried sick. I've met his kids. I was listening to a voice note from his mum. Yeah, I mean, it's very tough. I'm very, very worried. I'm very worried for him. I wish there was more I could do for him. But yeah, it makes me sad for him. It makes me sad for his family, and it makes me sad for this country. What a fucking shame. And what I mean that in every sense. The world should be looking at us now and just thinking, what a fucking disgrace. What a disgrace. For what? For a documentary. It's insane.
And where can you see the country heading?
There's two routes. We stay on the path we're on now. The path we're on now and the path that we've been on is gulags and genocide. And it will be the people who are the ones who are saying they're not racist and they hate racism, they're going to induce the most amount of racial tension and racism. And it will be gulags and genocide. It's going to get really, really rough. The other route is there's some kind of revolution or revival, and we go back to sanity. I don't even think it's a left-wing versus right-wing thing now. I get asked more and more to speak on right-wing podcasts, but that's because most left-wing podcasts are ideologically infected lunatics who can't stop fucking shrieking. I am a classical liberal, which means I am just left of centre. I'm a leftist, but I'm not insane. And And I'm robust, I'm resilient. So you can say words to me and I'm like, oh my God, you said a fucking word. It's not left versus right anymore. It's fantasy, narcissistic delusion. The woke is a narcissistic death cult. And that's the gulags and genocide route. With all their kindness and all their empathy, they will lead us to massive violence. On the right, which is not really the right, it's just based in reality. That's a fantasy. And then there's people who are living in reality. People who live in reality, they're not afraid, they're courageous, people are people. You don't want to divide people up based on their fucking skin color because, Jesus Christ, it's 2024. And we can get away from all this fantasy-based death cult stuff and back to normality. And normality is now what it's always been. Most of us are here due to heterosexual union between two consenting adults, and we have been for a long time. And me saying that isn't homophobic or transphobic. It's factual. It's factual. We should get back to prioritizing what is good for the future health and wealth of the country and not prioritizing stuff that isn't. That doesn't mean what I didn't just say is go and kick a trans person or attack people who are not hetero. That's not what I'm saying. We should come back to reality. We should come back to health and thriving and building a country that's meaningful based on good, core, clear, simple values, which is what we've always done throughout history. We're just in this period of fucking mass psychosis right now.
I wonder what that wave of woke lunatics will think about you confirming that you're left of centre, but you're also supporting Tommy Robinson's movement.
Oh, I can tell you what they think. I'm a covert Nazi. I've seen a meme made when I said I was a classic liberal. There was this, somebody posted a meme underneath it because I said it on a podcast I used to run a couple of years ago. And it was like, there was a guy holding a mask and he pulled the mask up and the mask said classical liberal and underneath neo-Nazi. Like, do you know who the Nazis are, you fucking idiots? The National Socialists of Germany. Which of my beliefs are you comparing to genocidal, sadistic, race-obsessed, black magic practicing lunatics who invented meth, by the way, for fuck's sake? These were like, come on, it's so, that's why I don't care now. That's why, call me racist, call me a Nazi, call me a white supremacist. It doesn't mean anything. And whose fault is it that it doesn't mean anything? Your fault. You've made this meaningless. In fact, now if somebody says, oh, he's a right-wing racist, I'll be like, better listen to what he has to say. Because that means you've pissed off the woke. So they're just tarring you with this brush. And what you'll usually find is somebody like me, who's left on some issues, right on some issues, a classic liberal on other issues, and who just isn't insane.
It'll be interesting to pick up this conversation in a year's time to see what's happened.
We can do it in the gulag. You'll be in the cell next to me.
Yeah. Trying to nick your bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil this off down a political track. 'Cause I don't want it to detract from your story.
Yeah.
Which is going to be of interest to people that have followed you for many years. But it's certainly a good spot to put a pin in and see where we are in a year's time.
100%.
And we can get back together again and just see where we're at, because I also dread what's going to happen down the line.
Yeah.
I'm an optimist by default, but from what I've seen since Keir Starmer has taken the lead of the country, it's worrying. And I believe he has behaved like a psychopath.
Yeah.
And I could compound on that and give context, but I'm not going to. Okay. We will revisit in a year's time. But for you, what does the future hold for you as a person?
Authenticity in all things, because that which is not for you, if you take it through deception, you won't be able to keep it. The stuff that's for you, and if you're authentic, your vibration is authentic, you're being real, what's for you will come to you. Everything else you won't get to keep.
Anything else you want to say before we call it a day?
Look after your body, look after your mind, choose to be happy. Choose to be happy.
It's been a joy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, brother.
Cheers.